Margaret, my mother-in-law, sneered, waving the papers in my face. Did you really think Anthony would share anything with you? You signed everything away. I sat at my kitchen table calm, watching her ruin the edges of what she thought was my defeat. Her fancy clothes and perfect hair couldn't hide the smugness on her face. You should read those papers again, I said quietly, sipping my tea. I'm Olivia, 34 years old, and my marriage was falling apart in the most predictable way. My husband, Anthony, had fallen for his 23-year-old secretary. Typical. But what wasn't typical was how I had prepared for this. Margaret expected me to cry, to beg. Instead, I was calm, even smiling. These are the papers you signed last month, she insisted, pointing at my signature, giving up all claims to Anthony's money and property. His lawyer made sure of it. I nodded. Oh yes, Anthony's lawyer, the one you recommended. Mr. Peters, wasn't it? Margaret's smugness wavered. For the first time, she looked unsure. What are you saying? She snapped. Mr. Peters is one of the best. He's handled our family's legal matters for years. Oh, I know, I said, getting up to refill my cup. Just like I know about the other papers I signed that day. 3 months ago, I noticed the signs, late nights, secret calls, sudden interest in his looks. But what really gave it away was Margaret. She visited more often, always suggesting I protect the family assets. You should keep your inheritance separate, she'd say. Let Anthony handle investments. She always had a story about some poor wife who lost everything in a divorce. I played along, pretending to be the naive small-town girl she thought I was. What she never realized was that I had been watching and learning for 8 years. Margaret's confidence cracked. What other papers? She asked, nervous now. I walked to my home office, with Margaret following behind. From my drawer, I pulled out a thick envelope. You see, when I saw those documents, I had my own lawyer check them. And she found something interesting. Anthony had been hiding money. Margaret's face turned pale. You had no right. I had every right, I interrupted. I'm his wife. And when my lawyer saw the hidden accounts, the property transfers to your name, she told me to sign your papers, and mine too. I spread out the documents, 8 years of financial records, bank statements, property transfers, and most importantly, emails between Margaret and Anthony, plotting to leave me with nothing. Did Anthony tell you about his offshore account? I asked, or did you help him set it up? Margaret sank into the chair. You're bluffing, she whispered. I smiled and held up a printout. Passwords are usually something personal. Anthony always used your birthday. So sweet, right? Her face drained of color as she saw her own words in black and white. Emails where she advised Anthony on hiding assets. You really thought I'd sign away my rights without a backup plan? I asked. You taught me well how to protect family assets. Margaret reached for the papers, but I pulled them back. These are copies. The originals, with my lawyer, along with recordings of all our talks about finances. A noise at the door made us turn. Anthony stood there flustered. Behind him, his secretary sat in the car, looking unsure. Mom, he called, then froze when he saw the papers. What's going on? I smiled, gathering everything into the envelope. Perfect timing. We were just talking about the documents you had me sign, and some other things you might want to hear. His confusion was almost funny. Like his mother, he thought he was smart. He never imagined the quiet girl he underestimated had been planning all along. I gestured toward the kitchen table. Let's talk, all of us, about how this divorce is going to work. As I walked past a mirror, I caught my reflection. I looked exactly how Margaret always claimed I wasn't, strong, confident, and completely in control. This wasn't the ending I wanted for my marriage, but it was the one I prepared for. And as I laid out my terms, I knew one thing: Margaret would never call me unworthy again. The next morning, Anthony and Margaret sat across from me at our kitchen table, their faces a mix of anger and disbelief. My lawyer, Diana, spread out the documents between us, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to Margaret's barely contained rage. This is blackmail, Margaret hissed, her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled from running her hands through it repeatedly. We'll fight this. Diana raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Henderson, I'd advise against using that term. Everything my client has gathered is perfectly legal documentation of financial fraud and attempted asset concealment. Would you like me to detail the potential criminal implications? I watched Anthony shift uncomfortably in his seat. The confident businessman who planned to leave me with nothing now looked like a schoolboy caught cheating on a test. His young secretary was notably absent. Apparently, the prospect of a lengthy legal battle had dampened the romance. Let's review what we discovered, Diana continued, her voice crisp. Multiple unauthorized transfers from joint accounts, property titles altered without spousal consent, and documented evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. She paused, looking directly at Margaret, including several recorded conversations where you explicitly advised your son on how to hide marital assets. Those recordings were made without my knowledge, Margaret protested. They're inadmissible. I couldn't help but smile. Actually, they were made with your knowledge. Remember all those times you insisted we meet at the country club to discuss family matters? Single-party consent state, Margaret, and the club's security cameras caught every meeting. Anthony finally spoke up, his voice hoarse. Olivia, please, we can work something out. I made a mistake. A mistake. I interrupted, keeping my voice level. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, systematically planning to leave your wife destitute while hiding assets with your mother's help. That's a choice, Anthony. A series of choices, actually. Deanna pulled out another document. Here's what my client is proposing. A fair division of assets, including the properties transferred to Mrs. Henderson's name in the past year. In exchange, we don't pursue criminal charges for fraud. Margaret's face turned an interesting shade of red. Criminal charges? You wouldn't dare. The IRS is very interested in undisclosed offshore accounts, I said quietly, especially ones used to hide marital assets. Would you like to explain to them why you're listed as a signatory? The color drained from both their faces. Anthony looked at his mother in shock. Mom, you're on my offshore account? Margaret's composure finally cracked. I was protecting you. That girl never deserved you or our family's money. I had to make sure. That's enough. Anthony's voice was sharp. You told me this would be simple. That Olivia would never figure it out. That she'd just accept whatever we gave her. I sat back, watching mother and son turn on each other. 8 years of dealing with Margaret's subtle manipulations and condescension had taught me patience. Now I was watching her carefully constructed plan implode, taking her relationship with her son down with it. You know what the funny thing is? I said, drawing their attention back to me. I would have been fair in a divorce. If you'd just been honest, if you treated me with basic respect, we could have ended this marriage cleanly. Deanna nodded, sliding another document forward. My client's terms are more than reasonable, considering the circumstances. I suggest you review them carefully. Anthony picked up the papers, his hands trembling slightly. As he read, his face grew increasingly pale. The house, my investment portfolio, the vacation property, all marital assets, Diana confirmed, and all subject to equitable division. Unless you prefer we present our evidence of fraud to the court. Margaret reached for the papers, but I placed my hand firmly on them. You don't get a say in this anymore, Margaret. This is between me and my husband. Ex-husband, she snapped. Not yet. I corrected her. And until the divorce is final, every asset transfer you helped him make is subject to scrutiny. Shall we discuss the condo you put in your name last spring? The fight seemed to drain out of her. For the first time since I'd met her, Margaret looked her age, the carefully maintained facade of superiority crumbling. Anthony stared at the papers for a long moment before looking up at me. You planned this all along, didn't you? You knew what we were doing. I shook my head. No, Anthony, I just learned from watching your mother. She always said to protect myself, keep records, be prepared. I took her advice. I just don't think this is what she had in mind. Diana began gathering her documents. We'll need your decision by tomorrow. After that, we proceed with filing our evidence with the court. As they stood to leave, Margaret paused, turning to face me. I never thought you were good enough for him, she said, her voice bitter. I smiled. No, Margaret. You never thought I was smart enough. That was your mistake. 1 year later, I stood in my new apartment overlooking the city, a glass of wine in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, and life had taken an unexpected but wonderful turn. Diana called me that morning with the final update. The last property transfer is complete, she said, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction. Everything's settled exactly as we agreed. How's Margaret handling it? I couldn't help but ask. Diana chuckled. Last I heard, she's living in that condo she tried to hide. The one she insisted was bought with her personal funds. Turns out the paper trail led straight back to marital assets. She's lucky we didn't pursue fraud charges. I took a sip of my wine, remembering the day Anthony finally signed the divorce agreement. His young secretary had long since disappeared, probably realizing that a man who would conspire with his mother to defraud his wife wasn't the best choice for a future partner. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Emma, my sister, carrying takeout and wearing a broad grin. "Ready to celebrate?" she asked, setting the food on my kitchen counter. 1 year since Operation Takedown the in-laws commence. I laughed, grabbing plates from the cabinet. "You're enjoying this way too much." "Are you kidding?" Emma spread out the containers. My brilliant sister outsmarted the woman who spent 8 years trying to make her feel small. "I'm going to enjoy this forever." She wasn't wrong. The past year had been transformative. After the divorce settlement, I used my portion of the assets to start my own interior design firm, something Margaret had always dismissed as my little hobby. Now, barely a year later, my business was thriving, with a growing list of high-end clients. "Did you hear about Anthony?" Emma asked, settling onto my couch with her plate. I shook my head. I try not to keep track. "Well, you'd love this. He tried to reconcile with that secretary, but apparently she's engaged to someone else now. And get this, he's living in a rented apartment because his credit took a hit after all those suspicious transfers came to light." I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but understanding. I never wanted to hurt him. I just wanted to be treated with respect. "And that's why you won," Emma said firmly. "You didn't act out of revenge. You protected yourself from people who were trying to destroy you." The sound of my phone interrupted us. It was a text from Anthony's sister, Kate. Unlike her mother and brother, Kate had reached out after the divorce, apologizing for not standing up to Margaret's behavior sooner. "Mom's selling her jewelry," the text read. "Says she needs the money since she can't access the family accounts anymore. Thought you'd want to know how karma works." I showed the text to Emma, who burst out laughing. The mighty Margaret selling her precious jewels. Oh, how the tables have turned. But I didn't feel like laughing. Instead, I felt a profound sense of peace. The woman who had tried to make me feel worthless for 8 years was finally facing the consequences of her actions. "You know what the best part is?" I said, turning to Emma. "I learned something valuable from Margaret after all. She always said a woman needs to protect herself, be independent, keep records. She just never thought I'd use those lessons against her." My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Deanna. "Just heard from Anthony's new lawyer," she wrote. "He's asking if you'll consider removing the financial disclosure requirement from the divorce agreement. Says it's making it hard for him to move forward." The requirement that Anthony disclose all financial transactions had been my idea, a safeguard against any future attempts to hide assets. It was completely legal and, given his past behavior, entirely reasonable. "Tell him the agreement stands," I typed back. "Some lessons need to be remembered." Emma raised her glass. "To my sister, who turned the tables on the people who underestimated her." I clinked my glass against hers, but my toast was different. To lessons learned, strength found, and peace earned. Later that night, after Emma left, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Margaret's number, but I felt no urge to call back. Whatever crisis she was facing, it wasn't my problem anymore. I thought about the scared, insecure woman I'd been when I first married Anthony, so eager to please his family that I let them diminish me. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and finally free from the need for their approval. The next morning, I went to my office, where my design firm was buzzing with activity. My latest client, a wealthy divorcee, had specifically sought me out after hearing my story through the grapevine. "I want someone who understands the importance of protecting yourself," she'd said during our first meeting. "Someone who knows how to build something beautiful from a difficult situation." As I looked around at my growing business, my supportive sister, my true friends, I realized that Margaret had been right about one thing. I wasn't good enough for her son. I was too good for their whole toxic family. The last time I saw Margaret was at a charity event 6 months after the divorce. She was wearing noticeably less jewelry, her designer outfit from last season. She tried to avoid me, but I caught her eye across the room and smiled, raising my glass in a small salute. She turned away quickly, but not before I saw it. The recognition that she had created her own worst enemy. Every criticism, every manipulation, every attempt to make me feel inferior had only taught me how to be stronger. I did send her a thank you note though. After all, she'd spent 8 years teaching me exactly how to protect myself from people like her. It seemed only right to acknowledge the lesson. Life has a funny way of teaching us what we need to know. Sometimes the people who try to tear us down only show us how high we can build ourselves up. Margaret had wanted to prove I wasn't good enough. Instead, she proved I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. And that was worth more than any property settlement could ever be.